Now look at this queue here. How often do you see queues outside shops these days? This is Park Road in Bingley. And they are queuing up for new and used vinyl records. Hey, look at that. Oh. You know, last time I saw queues like that anywhere in this neck of the woods, in this county, would be back in 60s and 70s, where near Christmas time folk used to queue outside a butcher's in Bradford city centre in Ivegate, called Philip Smith's. Hey, who remembers that? Philip Smith's butchers. And around Christmas time used to be queuing all up Ivegate and bloody hell into Westgate, and and there we are in the middle of Bingley, outside a used stroke new vinyl record shop. Big queue. Whoa! Another beautiful day in Kettlewell. Old Kettlewell starting to replace Pateley Bridge and Massam as a favourite starting point. So just me and Andy today, and we're going to end up. He said, "How are we going to go there, pal?" Suppose I can't now. But you don't look like a coach to me. Before anybody says, "Neither do you wheelie here, knobhead," let me tell you, we were parked there, not in the coach bays. Right, so we're gonna go up through Buckden and Cray, a little place called Cray, and wind our way over the tops. We'll come out somewhere around West Witton, and then we're going to go to Leyburn, and from Leyburn we're going to go to Reeth, and we may just wend our way up to Tanhill. And the Tanhill Inn, of course, the highest pub in England. Might be the highest pub in the United Kingdom, unless there's a higher one in Scotland or Wales, I don't know. Anyway, highest pub in the country. Out on the beautiful Royal Enfield Classic 650 again. Hey, now we're going to bring the Beezer out today, the BSA. But yesterday Morrison's came early with the delivery, and of course with it being beautiful warm weather, all the doors were open. And the Morrison's delivery driver, she rocked up early and made the mistake of actually coming up the driveway and hollering over the intermediate gate that she was here, which of course put Eddie into Mach 3 rocket mode, and he bounded out of the conservatory in bloody sublight mode, and in trying to get to the Morrison's delivery lady and consume her for lunch, in so doing took off a rear indicator on the Beezer, on the BSA Goldstar, because they're only on like a little plastic stalk, and nothing, much as I love that bike and the looks of that bike, the build quality is nothing like this bike. Streets apart, let me tell you. Streets apart. but I'll be doing a back-to-back review once the weather allows, because it's set to turn after today. But I'll be doing a back-to-back review of this and the BSA. But yeah, so they're only on like a little plastic stalk, and he snapped it clean off. The little bugger. So anyway, I've super glued it back and put a bit of black tape round it. You can't really tell, but and super glue and plastic is a very, very strong bond. So I'm hoping, notwithstanding the fact that there's plenty of shake, rattle and roll, and God knows what else goes on when you're riding that single cylinder thumper of a BSA, it should remain intact. We shall see. So I'm out on this. Hey. Any excuse. Another peloton. Don't get me started. Suffice to say, on the way here, a similar sized one causing absolute mayhem on the double white line system. Right. Aye, so quite a few folk have said, yeah, I enjoy your old coppering tales, your old tales of policing, going back to when I joined in 1980. And of course I had that article published in Mags, bi-monthly magazine, Motorcycle Action Group. Pleased to chuff about that. But one thing that always sticks in my memory, and in equal measure in my bloody craw, is a phase that we went through in the cops in West Yorkshire back in the sort of mid-80s. Now, when I joined in 1983, the force, so fourth biggest police force in the country, third biggest provincial force, i.e. outside of the Met, which you don't normally count the Met in London. So let's say third biggest normal police force, West Yorkshire Metropolitan Police, not to be confused with the Metropolitan Police, but we were called back then West Yorkshire Metropolitan Police. And some bright spark, and this is where a bit of rot set in the 80s, decided to drop the Metropolitan for absolutely no good reason, because it was and still is a metropolitan force, i.e. serving metropolitan district councils. In the case of West Yorkshire, 5 metropolitan district councils: Leeds, Bradford, Calderdale, Kirklees and Wakefield, which is why it's such a big force. So it was called West Yorkshire Metropolitan Police. But at some point, and I suspect that the motivation was an attempt at disassociating ourselves, disengaging ourselves as a local provincial police force from the name of the Metropolitan Police in London. Massive force with all sorts of national responsibilities that local forces don't have, however big. But that'll have been it. It was a superficial gesture, and it were all part and parcel of, would you believe, a bit of what I would now call wokeness. Hey, of the force started to go woke. And after I joined in 1983, and after the cessation of the miners' dispute in early 85, suddenly we just became West Yorkshire Police. And I thought, what have they done that for? And what followed that was some absolutely crazy ideas. right? And I think it started with they withdrew all the flat caps. Now, of course, if you were out on foot on patrol in the city centres, Bradford, Leeds, Huddersfield, Halifax, Wakefield, all of them, then you'd wear your typical tall British policeman's helmet that people all over the world are familiar with. But if you were driving a car or you were crewing a car, then obviously had a flat cap with the black and white checkered band. Right, navy blue and white actually, but it looks black and white. Checkered band that, again, just about everybody's familiar with. Well, some bright spark, I mean, it can only have been the chief at the time, and I won't mention his name, to be fair, but it could only have been the chief and his deputy and his ACCs, his assistants, that come up with this mad idea that they'd ban flat caps, and the only people that could wear flat caps would be inspectors and above, because they didn't wear helmets, period. And back then had white shirts instead of blue. So only PCs and sergeants had blue shirts, and inspectors and above and all the female officers had white shirts. They decided to ban flat caps unless you were an inspector or above, or a traffic officer, road traffic, with a white top, or task force, specialist central department task force, which is a non-territorial division that supports the territorial divisions in the force, public order support and all that. But if you were in any of them categories, you couldn't have a flat cap. Look at that down there. Aye, you couldn't have a flat cap. And what you had to do, driving your normal divisional police vehicles, which were your transit vans and your bog standard cars, like back then Vauxhall Chevettes, Morris Itals, Ford Escort Mark II and Mark III. You had to carry your bloody helmet in car with you, put it in back seat, and of course, if you got out to a job, it doesn't matter if it were an emergency or what it were, or if you had to bail out of the car and chase somebody. God forbid if you forgot your helmet, because if you were caught, you get a bollocking. It was ridiculous. And then some idiot says, well, just wear your helmet in car like you would a flat cap. Well, let me tell you, I'm 6'1". Back then, the minimum height requirement for male officers in the force were 5'9", so there were nobody under 5'9". So you try getting inside a Vauxhall Chevette at 5'9" with a tall policeman's helmet on and drive. Let me tell you, if you could manage to do it, it'd be most dangerous. And nobody had thought about any of this at all. They were just stupid, ridiculous, irresponsible operational decisions made at a command level by people that hadn't seen an angry man for about 20 years. Lunacy. And it manifested itself in other areas as well. So traffic got a kick in. For quite a period around that time, the divisional traffic cars, now these are cars with highly trained, highest in the land, class 1 police advanced drivers, of which I'm proud to say I was one for some time. But they gave them, as divisional traffic cars, a lot of them, bog standard 1600 saloon Vauxhall Cavaliers, Mark II Vauxhall Cavalier with a bog standard 1600cc, non-fuel injected, normally aspirated engine. Slow as a pig with piles, I'm not telling you. Hopeless. And then stick a roof bar on with feds, with blue lights and siren unit and everything. Honestly, an absolute joke. And these vehicles, and the other one will be the Eco Ford Sierra. They had a Ford Sierra 1.8 litre eco engine, and they decided that'd be a good idea as a traffic car as well. I'm not kidding you, once you put all the bloody trimmings on it, flat out, 80 mile an hour tops, and it'd take half a day to get there. Absolute joke. But it were all part of this form of the early wokeism, where the force, for some bizarre reason, our force, was trying to soften its image, to try and become less, quote-unquote, quasi-military, out of some deluded notion that we could better endear ourselves to the public that we served by softening our image and not having this image of coppers flying around in big fast cars. Well, if you're in traffic, part of your responsibility is to stop cars that are doing wrong, or cars that are being driven by criminals, or cars that have been stolen. And you've got to be able to engage in a pursuit, and that's what you were trained to do. They spent thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds training cops to drive to the very highest standards, and then put them out to division operationally and giving them a bloody piss poor 80 brake horsepower car, and then expect them to go chasing bloody criminals up and down the M606 and M62 and all of these places. Now granted, the motorway unit, which was separate, had slightly more powerful cars, but there were only 2.8 Granadas to start with before they got the fantastic 24 valve 3 litre Senators with a dual ram engine, Vauxhall Senators. They were blistering. I did my advanced test in one of those, a blistering car. But before that, they just had bog standard bloody 2.8 injection, big, lardy, hippo-like 4 Granadas. But of course they were a lot faster than bloody shitty Cavaliers and Sierras, weren't they? But none of them up to the job, really. Just a ridiculous waste of money. Ridiculous waste of money. And again, that was another gratuitous nod to this manufactured notion that had no resemblance to reality, that the public somehow wanted to see a softer image of the police. And if you somehow gave the traffic officers shit cars that were just bog standard bloody like mum and dad's family saloon, it would give this image that we had somehow a load more traditional bobbies on the beat, which were bollocks. It didn't change the numbers, the ratios at all. But this was the notion. And the other one was, if you worked inside, like the force control room, places like that, if you had an inside job, you'd get a police issue NATO jumper, one of these ribbed woolly pulleys, military style, that you see the Army have and the RAF and the Navy. And the police issue ones were navy blue. If you worked inside, outside of the public eye, you could have a nice warm jumper. If you worked outside in bloody bollock freezing cold winters of Yorkshire, you couldn't have one of these here jumpers. You got a thin lamb's wool blue jumper like you'd have bought at C&A, like something that the cast of The Good Life would wear. You know, that sort of thing. A Valdunican jumper. So if you worked inside in nice warm control room, you got a nice thick warm smart woolly pulley that you didn't really need. And if you worked outside in freezing bollocking cold, you got a bloody Valdunican jumper. Lord of mercy, I can't believe we went through that period. Anyway, eventually we got a new chief constable and it all changed. I think the new chief came in and saw what, because we used to be a laughing stock of criminals. Folk were, because twocking were all the rage, wasn't it, back then? That's where twocking had its roots, in the 80s going through into the early 90s. And of course, in West Yorkshire they had a bloody field day because nobody could catch them. If you try and chase and apprehend a stolen Golf GTI in a bloody 1600 box standard Cavalier with a big barn door with a set of blue lights on top, oh my god. And just the credibility of the force was absolutely shot to pieces, and it was an early form of wokeism. Now I know woke is used somewhat differently today, and it's often used in a pejorative way. I don't see it as a pejorative term as such, even though that's very much how it's used. Because as far as I'm concerned, you can be what you want, you can do what you want with who you want, provided you do no harm and it's legal. It's up to you. You can identify how you want, you can do what you want with who you want, etc, etc, etc. Provided you're doing no harm and you're not breaking any laws, absolutely fine. All I tend to say is just don't ram it down my throat. I'm from a different generation, I'm old school. I get that there are individual rights and that obviously extends to identity. Absolutely fine, fill your boots, do what you want, but please don't ram it down my throat, because try as I might, I can't get my head around it. Not because I'm unwilling to try and get my head around it, but because I'm from a different generation. And we are a part of a community, us of a certain age, of a certain generation, that have been brought up in a certain way over many decades, and it's hardwired in. And we have a right, as much as other groups, to claim the sanctity of that identity and that way of thinking. So that's it, live and let live, but don't try and ram it down my throat. So this has acquired this pejorative term, woke, but I look back then to the 1980s, and it were a form of wokeism, i.e. the tolerance of something that doesn't really need to be tolerated in the broadest sense and doesn't even exist. It's the best way that I can put it. It's quite a clumsy way of articulating it, really, but it's the best I can do while I'm riding through the Yorkshire Dales on this bike one-handed. It's the best I can do. If I were doing a voiceover, I'd put it far more eloquently. Let's put it that way. Hey! But yeah, went through that period in the 1980s, and there were other manifestations of it on a less sort of expansive scale. I mean, the other one that I've mentioned before is, of course, they redesigned the Force crest, and they decided to put a logo on. We'd not previously had a logo. It was just West Yorkshire Metropolitan Police, the crown and the police star badge. That was it. And then they decided, oh, we better redesign this. And they redesigned it and put in this "in the public service." In the public service. Like, well, we bloody know we're in the public service. We don't need a silly strapline on the side of the car. How many thousands of pounds they paid to change the livery on all the Force's vehicles? Complete waste of money. And then, as I said previously, when they did it, either they forgot, but I suspect they didn't forget, it was deliberate. They thought they could get away with it as part of this decoupling of the Force from national identities. They did away with the crown. I think the explanation was it was an administrative error. Hey, my arse, administrative error. Trying it on. And of course I got a right bollocking from Home Officers, but as soon as the next HMI inspection came along, and one of the HMIs sort of saw these forced crests on all the vehicles and probably thought to himself, fuck me, where's Crown gone? You know, you've got to have a crown on a police vehicle because police officers are Crown appointees. They are Crown officers, they're not employees. It's a different thing. Coppers are not employed. Right? Coppers are not employees. Coppers are Crown appointees. Completely different. No right to take industrial action, yada yada yada. No right to automatically a days off or weekends off or not doing nights or any of that. Totally different set of rules. So then they had to spend another god knows, they had to change them again. All the forced crests had to be changed again at great cost, thousands. Because we're talking hundreds of police vehicles, and you know, stuff like the forced crest to be on all sorts, like the you know, they'll have a special name, but on the police horses obviously have that beautiful blue blanket over them, don't they? And they all had the forced crest, they all had to be changed, all sorts had to be changed. What an absolute bloody joke. Honestly. Yeah, all because of this bloody crazy notion that we needed to soften our image, as if the public gave a all the public's bothered about is if they become a victim of crime, that it's properly investigated, and if they pick the phone up because they need the police in an emergency, that they actually answer the phone, number one, and number two, rock up within a decent amount of time. That's all the public have ever been bothered about, isn't it? Not interested in all else. Not interested in all else at all. But no, some bright spark thought that these superficial changes, superficial in all except cost, would do the trick. My total laziness. Total and utter bone-idle, lazy-brained approach. We can't be bothered doing the difficult things to improve the standards of service to the public, so we'll just have like little mission statements on the side of the police cars and new livery, and we won't have powerful cars for the traffic department, we'll just have any old shit. What a joke. Oh, it didn't last long, but for the 2 or 3 years that it did last, there were a lot of wasted money, and nobody paid the price for it. Aye, so there's a little tale for you. Hey, I'm going to shut up now and let you take in some scenery.